Okay guys, welcome back. So for this video now, let's start off by having a closer look at that process of respiration. So those four phases, let's look at them a bit closer. Alright, start with the pulmonary ventilation. So pulmonary ventilation, like we said before, is the movement of air into the lungs. And we're going to have two steps to this, I guess. We're going to have inhalation, which is when we bring air into the lungs, and we'll have exhalation, which is when we get rid of that air. The air exits the lungs. Now, inhalation is an active phase of breathing. We have to engage muscles in order for this to happen. So what happens in this phase is our muscles that we use to ventilate the lungs, which are going to be the muscles of the thorax, the intercostal muscles between the ribs, and the diaphragm. Those muscles are going to contract. When they do, they will enlarge or make the thoracic cavity bigger. This is going to cause a pressure difference between the atmosphere and the inside of our lungs. And then once we get a pressure difference like that, then it's going to be the laws of physics that take over, and that helps ventilate our lungs. And I'm going to show you how that works in the next slide. Now, exhalation, this is going to be the passive side of breathing. Okay, when we've taken our breath in, the gas is exchanged at the alveoli. We've accumulated the carbon dioxide back from the tissues. What happens are our respiratory muscles, so the intercostals, the muscles of the thorax and the diaphragm, they're going to relax. And when they relax, our chest goes back to our original size, which is a bit smaller than it was during inhalation. Again, when that happens, we're going to have a pressure difference. And once again, good old physics takes over, and that will force the gas out of our lungs into the atmosphere. So this picture is going to show us everything. Now, I don't want you guys to worry too much about the actual numbers. We're just going to talk about an increase or a decrease in pressure. So in this first picture here, this is our relaxed state. The chest is in a normal position. If we switch here to picture number 2, we're looking at inhalation. Now, when we inhale, remember, those muscles are going to contract. They're going to get smaller. When the muscles get smaller, it does the opposite for us. It actually increases the size of the chest. When we increase the size of the chest, it's also going to decrease the pressure. So the pressure inside the chest gets lower. When we get a gradient like that, a lower pressure in one place and a higher pressure in the other, then physics is going to say that we're going to have movement of gas from a higher pressure to a lower pressure. And the result of that is the air from the environment will move into both of the lungs. So that's when we inhale. When we move down to the exhalation phase, now that diaphragm and those muscles are going to relax. So when they relax, our chest is going to return back to our normal size. As a result of that, the chest volume is going to get lower. And when that happens, we're going to increase the pressure that's inside of our lungs. When we do that, again, we've got a pressure gradient that is going to push the air from our lungs into the environment, and that's how we exhale. So those are the processes of physical respiration, where we bring gas into our lungs and we push gas out of our lungs. Now, we also have the external and the internal exchange. Now, the external exchange, this is a bit tricky, but the external exchange is going to happen is going to happen in the lungs, okay? The internal exchange is going to happen at the tissue level in the body. So try and keep that in mind. It sounds weird to say external exchange, but we're still talking about the lungs, but that's what actually happens. So for the external exchange part of the lungs, of the gas exchange, we're going to have movement of gas between the alveoli, which is a part of the lung, don't forget, the smallest part of the lung, and the blood, which is going to be part of the circulatory system. So this exchange is going to happen at the capillary beds that surround each alveoli, and that has to be in a moist environment. In order for diffusion to happen, we have to have water present, or we need to have an aqueous solution there. So we need to have our lungs moist at all times. So that's our external exchange. Now, when the gas travels through the circulation, through the blood circulatory system, and it travels down to the tissues, this is where we're going to see internal exchange. Now, this is the point where we get to a capillary in the tissue, and the gas is going to move from the blood, and then it's going to move into the body tissues, right? So it's going to happen at our capillaries. Oxygen will be carried through the blood by that molecule of hemoglobin. That's an important protein molecule that carries oxygen. And the bond between oxygen and hemoglobin is really easily to break. So hemoglobin gives up oxygen really, really easy when it encounters a concentration gradient, which it will in the tissues. Low oxygen in the tissues, high oxygen in the blood. So hemoglobin is willing to give up that oxygen really easy in order for the concentration gradient to resolve. Now, if you've ever wondered why carbon monoxide, CO, is so dangerous, is because carbon dioxide we can't use for our metabolism, okay? But it has a very high bond, a very tight bond with hemoglobin. So if carbon monoxide is present, it will bind to hemoglobin and it won't let go. So if all of your molecules of hemoglobin are bound up with carbon monoxide, it prevents you from inhaling, or it prevents you from exchanging with oxygen. So as a result, you basically can't get oxygen to your tissues, you can't carry out metabolism, and that can be absolutely fatal. It can kill you by carbon monoxide poisoning. So here's a look at this stuff again. So here is going to be our external exchange right here, because that's going to happen at the capillaries of the alveoli. That's where the gas is going to go from the lungs, the alveoli, into the blood through those capillaries. And then if we look down here at B, this is going to be our internal exchange, and that's going to happen at the tissue level when the oxygenated blood travels to a capillary bed in a tissue. The oxygen is given up from the blood to the tissue so that those cells can use that oxygen in metabolism, and then in turn, of course, the carbon dioxide is going to be picked up in the blood, and it's going to be carried back to the heart and then the lungs for ventilation. Okay, so when we're talking about gas transport, we're of course mostly talking about oxygen and carbon dioxide. Oxygen is going to be present in the blood in a couple of different ways. First, we're going to have a small portion of it dissolved in water, so we're going to find that in the plasma. And then we're going to have the much bigger proportion, the most of it, the bulk of it, will be bound to that hemoglobin protein. And each molecule of hemoglobin can hold 4 molecules of oxygen at the same time. Okay? Now, it's present in various concentration. Oxygenated blood in the systemic arteries and the pulmonary veins reach about 97% saturation. Okay, so 97% of the blood's potential capacity is full when we have oxygenated blood. Now, deoxygenated blood, that doesn't mean that it has absolutely no oxygen left. Deoxygenated blood is going to have about 70% oxygen saturation, which means it has about 70% of the oxygen it can possibly carry still present. So when we say deoxygenated blood, we're not talking about zero oxygen, we're just talking about a lower concentration than when we have oxygenated blood. Now, carbon dioxide is produced all the time. Okay, it's a constant byproduct of our metabolism, and we transport it in several forms, but mostly gets carried back in the blood. Now, in the blood, of course, it's going to have a crucial role to play in terms of the blood pH. If carbon dioxide is dissolved in a liquid, like our plasma, it becomes an acid. And if we have high carbon dioxide in our blood, we're going to have a low pH, or a low blood pH. And our blood is very sensitive, the control of our respiration is very sensitive to pH. control of our respiration is basically monitored by chemoreceptors that we have throughout our body. Now, the ones particularly that are responsible for respiration are going to be located in the aorta and in these other places called carotid bodies. Okay, so we have these chemoreceptors, and they're going to be very sensitive to the level of carbon dioxide which is in our blood. And what these chemoreceptors are going to do is they're going to change our breathing rate in order to keep our blood pH at a certain level. And our blood pH is going to depend on how much carbon dioxide is present in the blood. So a very important thing to notice is if we have a decrease in carbon dioxide concentration in our blood, that causes an increase in the pH. Okay, so as carbon dioxide goes down, pH goes up and the blood goes basic. Now, if the opposite occurs and we get carbon dioxide increasing, so level of carbon dioxide goes up, this is going to cause a decrease in the pH of the blood, and that's going to cause the blood to become acidic. Our chemoreceptors are going to function so that our blood stays within a specific set pH. So our respiration will change based on these conditions. Okay, so we can have these conditions, for example, respiratory alkalosis will represent this condition right here, and that's when we've got low carbon dioxide, and as a result of that, our blood goes basic. And then we can get the other condition here called respiratory acidosis, and that's going to be what happens in this situation when we have extra carbon dioxide and our pH of our blood goes down and it goes acidic. What we'll do is we'll change the rate of respiration so that we either get rid of extra carbon dioxide, so that we increase the pH to get it in that normal range, or we slow our breathing down so that we have a little bit more carbon dioxide there, so that our breath goes a little bit more acidic, and that maintains that pH balance. So control of respiration is always going to be based on the pH of the blood, and the way we control the pH of the blood is by controlling how much carbon dioxide is present.